I used to believe that deconstruction was the most dangerous thing a Christian could do. I was taught that it was rebellion, a slippery slope, a sure path to losing faith. But here's the truth. Deconstruction just might be the best thing that could possibly happen to Christianity. In fact, it might be the only thing that can save it. Here's what I mean. Grace and peace to the seekers and the saints. I'm Joshua, a Jesus follower and truth seeker. Welcome back to The Truth in Tension. For years, churches have painted deconstruction as destruction, as if faith were so fragile that a few hard questions could shatter it, as if God is afraid of honesty. Questions about the Bible, leadership, or theology were framed as rebellion against God himself. To ask was to betray him, because faith wasn't about trusting God, it was about holding the right doctrines with absolute certainty. And any wobble or vacillation within that certainty meant your soul was at risk. Warnings of danger or slippery slopes kept us from exploring it all. If you questioned one belief, the narrative went, you'd lose them all. Pastors and leaders positioned themselves as protectors of the truths, painting alternative perspectives as dangerous, liberal, or demonic. Even community and being welcome within a church body has been contingent on agreement with a particular set of beliefs, a very narrow set of beliefs. So belonging has been tied to conformity. Not only this, but shame has been used as social control to maintain this conformity, telling stories of fallen Christians, those who doubted, deconstructed, or even left. And these stories became cautionary tales to make sure that everyone else stayed in line. Because in these high control groups, the system has been equated with God himself. Questioning the church, its politics, or its leaders felt indistinguishable from questioning God. And those fallen Christians who did leave or asked the hard questions were cast as enemies of truth, proof that doubt inevitably leads to apostasy. This is what I believed. I thought that those who asked questions and began that deconstructive journey were basically on their way to leaving Christianity and going off the deep end. So when I started doubting, questioning, learning, I thought I was betraying God. But what I've found on this journey has changed everything. So let's talk about that shift. When I actually began deconstructing, I realized it's not about destroying faith. It's more like remodeling a house. And that usually does start with a little bit of demolition. Because sometimes part of the house is rotted or needs total replacement. Sometimes things just aren't working and they have to go. Abuse, hypocrisy, toxic theology. It's healthier just to tear those things down and get them out of here than to try and pretend that they're safe. Unfortunately for myself, and probably for many others also, this was one of the last things to happen in my deconstructive journey. And regardless of what order it did happen in, each step needed to happen. I think in terms of deconstruction, we often see what needs to be demolished, but at first don't have the strength to do it until much later. If you see the spiritual abuse, the hypocrisy, the unhealthy control, but don't quite have the strength to just rip it out, that's okay. Stick with me, we'll cover some other steps first that just might give you the strength to do that. After demolition, we've got renovation, because other times, you can gut the bad parts but keep the rest. A solid structure, a few good walls, running water or electricity, even if the mice have chewed some of the wiring. You replace what's broken, you fix the leaks, and you make the house livable again. For me, this looked a lot like changing my views on hell and atonement. There are good teachings out there on both of these things, but the ones that I got brought up with were just not. Nothing to lose my faith over, but certainly some things to fix and replace. There's also restoration. Sometimes you discover beauty underneath the paint and grime. You pull back a layer of wallpaper and realize there's beautiful wood paneling that people had covered up. You strip away the distortions and find the simple, powerful faith of Jesus again. Maybe you didn't need that wallpaper and just wanted to stain that wood paneling. Or found the room was better suited to paint. Or maybe you realized that the house had been taken from this to this and wanted to take it back, to see the beauty that it used to have. A lot of my restoration has come in the form of ancient church practices, like praying the daily office or utilizing Lectio Divina. I did a whole video on that here, so go ahead and check that out. But the idea is that these older ancient church practices really spoke to me in a way that more modern practices just haven't. I've been able to work through the layers of change and distortion to see what the church has done through history and to restore some of those practices and make them my own. Once you've demolished what needed to be taken out and renovated some of the things that just needed a little fixing, restored some of those old things that you really wanted to keep, then you can make room for expansion. Sometimes you might need to break down a couple of walls to add more light, more space, more welcome. And as you do, the floor plan begins to feel much more open, much bigger, and your faith becomes something larger than you ever thought possible. Like I said, I kind of did this in reverse order, because this is definitely the first thing that began to happen to me when I started questioning. When my hermeneutics professor began to open up various ways that the Bible could be interpreted outside of the norm, but inside the heart of God. I started to realize that the Bible was much bigger than the doctrines and the dogma that I had been taught, and God is even bigger than that. And not only is deconstruction more like renovation than demolition, but the Bible is full of it. The prophets deconstructed in their age, speaking out against idolatry and dead religion of their day. Even Jesus deconstructed the law in his Sermon on the Mount when he said, "Ye have heard it said, but I say unto you." He reinterpreted and reinvented what was already written, demolishing all that was wrong with it, renovating and restoring the things that could be fixed, and then expanding outward to make it even bigger. So deconstruction doesn't have to be the end of Christianity. It can be the renovation God's Spirit has been doing all along. To reference Rowan Williams, a former Archbishop of Canterbury, we simply have to see what God is doing in the world and join in. I'm going to repeat that because I think it deserves repeating. We have to see what God is doing in the world and join in. Because the Judeo-Christian tradition has seen many deconstructions. The prophets, Jesus, the early church, the Reformation, the Great Awakenings, the Jesus Revolution. Every time there were those that thought it was evil, that thought that it was a dangerous thing and a slippery slope to hell. And every time, God rebuilt something more alive. So let's think about what God might be doing in our current deconstruction era, rather than just warding it off as evil and dangerous. More than that, let's try and see what he's doing and join in, trying to renovate the house of God by allowing his people to ask questions. And to you who are asking questions, keep it up. Demolish, renovate, restore, and then expand. And just maybe you can keep Jesus and save Christianity along with him. So I thought that deconstruction would destroy my faith, but instead it gave me space to find God more deeply, more honestly, more freely than ever before. Christianity doesn't need to be protected from deconstruction. It needs to embrace it, because that's how dead religion becomes living faith. If you're in the middle of your own demolition or renovation, you're not alone, so drop a comment and let's talk about it. And if this has helped you to see deconstruction in a new light, consider subscribing, because I've got more videos on reimagining faith coming down the pipe, starting with this one, where I break down the topic of the Bible as a Jewish literary work, and talk about how we should interact with it in our modern day. I will see you there. Till next time, go in peace, walk in truth, follow always the law of love.